I'm Andrea, a passionate DEI advocate and consultant on a mission. Join me in each episode as we celebrate diversity, ignite conversations, and craft workplaces and educational institutions where everyone thrives. This podcast is my commitment to making a meaningful impact on the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are you ready? Let's get diversifused. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Get Diversifused podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Horton-Mericli, founder of Diversifused DEI Consulting and a passionate DEI advocate and ally. This episode is all about navigating neurodiversity as a professional Black woman. My guest today is Ingershaye Colzie. Ingershe is an ADHD coach and psychotherapist with a focus on the intersectionality of ADHD and the experiences of Black women who are executives and entrepreneurs. With a deep understanding of the cultural nuances and societal dynamics, Ingershe supports Black women through empowerment and fostering an environment that acts as a safe and judgment-free zone where women can thrive. For the last 15 years, she has practiced as a psychotherapist and licensed social worker, where she offers the benefits of professional expertise with a lifetime of experience. She is the founder of Alchemy Coaching for Black women with ADHD. Welcome to Get Diversifused, Ingershe. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, cool. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, your story, your journey, and how you came to found Alchemy Coaching?
So my story is really interesting because when you are neurodiverse, it's usually a really interesting life. So when I was young, I started school early. I started school, I think, at 4 or 5. When we moved into the suburbs, my mother had me take the test to be able to get into school early. They didn't want her to have me take it because they thought I would fail it, but I passed it and I remembered every question. And so that kind of set me up for, the golden child, like very smart. And as long as we were reading to learn, it was great. Learning to read, once we started to read to learn, it flipped for me. Sometimes school was great and sometimes school was awful. Sometimes I remember to turn stuff in, sometimes I wouldn't. And we just really didn't know what was going on. I did get out of high school and I went to college. I went to an HBCU, shout out to Virginia State. But when I got to college, it too was another place where one day it would be great and another day it wouldn't be so great. And I didn't really know what was going on. So I get A's or I could get F's. In the same class, like in this week. So it was a lot, right? So we didn't know what was going on. And it took me 8 years to get it out of undergrad. Thank God it wasn't $60,000 a pop like it is now. But parents are great, like just kept sending me back and letting me figure it out. And I really do appreciate that part that they did that for me. Because it allowed me to like blossom and grow. And then when I got out of school, go to get jobs, I would get jobs, I would get fired, I would get another job, I would have to quit. I'd get bored, I'd be late, but then I'd do great. And it was just very confusing. And it wasn't until I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. And so I'm old enough where they were like, you should go and get your JD, right? Because of course you could use your JD, like, everybody could use one, which makes no sense when I think back about it. And so as I started to think about going to law school, I realized I was going to have to pay for it. My parents had paid for enough college. And I went to beauty school just to be able to pay for law school. And when I got there, it was great. It was amazing. When I started working, it was amazing because you met so many people, you did all these different things, we moved around a lot. There was a lot of talking and solving the problems of the world, like when somebody would come for their services. And that was great. And that's the time that I held a job. I had that job actually in the long run for almost 30 years.
Wow.
I didn't know I had ADHD. Like, I'm old enough that wasn't something that was even considered, especially for girls, and let alone, for Black. And we didn't know what was going on. I just know that worked, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until a little later when I decided that I might want to do something else that when I looked at it, it was like, I talk to people all day. I'm really good with them and helping them solve problems. So I should be a therapist. So when I decided to go to school, I got pregnant. So I was I was almost 40. So all the time I was in school, I was either pregnant or I had a newborn. And surprisingly, when I went to grad school, it was so easy to get through school because it was targeted. I was focused. And even when they told me to quit, because it's that long ago that when, they're like, oh, you're going to have kids, you shouldn't be in school. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
The kid's only 20, so it's really not that long ago.
Yeah.
But that really, the advice that I was given, and I was like, nope, because I knew if I stopped, I felt like I wasn't going to finish. And so I did finish. Yeah, and I continued to work at a salon, but I continued to be a therapist. And all that was great, but something felt like it was missing. I didn't know what it was. My son got diagnosed with ADHD when he was in about 5th grade. And that's when I realized that to get diagnosed, they send home a checklist. And every box, I was like, that's me, that's me, that's me. Oh, that's me too, right? So even though I was a therapist, we didn't really get a lot about ADHD. Like, I didn't learn about it because I wasn't going to treat children. It wasn't until then I was like, oh, you probably have that too. But I didn't really do a lot about it because I had to take care of him. I mean, he was a little Black boy in a white school district and not seen as like a kid with a neurodiversity or that, some type of learning attention issue. He was seen as a problem, like a discipline issue, even though my son he's very small in stature. So it was always very funny to me when they would say they were afraid of a very, very small child who, grew up here, knew all the teachers. Like, I lived here, I grew up. So I had to deal with all of that. So I didn't really take care of myself until a little later in life when I started to lose my words. And that means that I would think of a word and but it wouldn't come out of my mouth. And it got really scary really quickly because I was like, do you have early onset Alzheimer's? Maybe. But somewhere I remember when I was doing research, something about hormones and ADHD. And I happened to go to a CHAD meeting. CHAD is Children and Adults with ADHD. They're the largest organization that kind of deals with ADHD. And I went to a meeting and a woman talked about her getting diagnosed, and she basically had the same symptoms I did. And so I was a blessing because she told me how she got diagnosed, where she got diagnosed. And come to find out, getting a diagnosis it should be your right, but it's not your right. Like, it was a blessing I got diagnosed. It's unfortunate in this country that a lot of people either don't have the health care, can't get there, or a lot of people, women especially, are diagnosed with anxiety or depression or bipolar. Opposed to ADHD.
Or they're just being hormonal.
Yes.
Yep.
There's so many other things they're going to, attribute it to, as opposed to even looking at ADHD. And so that was really helpful, though, to know that was going on. But still, I didn't know about ADHD coaching. So there's an international ADHD conference. Who knew? I didn't know at the time.
That's interesting.
I knew was that there's a coach wanted to do a coaching scenario at the conference. The conference happened to be where I live in Philadelphia that year. And I was like, oh, I heard free coaching.
Wow.
So the would like to do that coaching in front of someone, but it wasn't going to be a one-off. We're going to coach a few sessions and then do one in front of everyone. I was like, fantastic. We started coaching. I'm, as you said, a therapist. I was late on my notes. I was like, let's work on that. As we began to work on that, it was like, it's so much more than my notes, and we go to the conference. I barely get there on time because, people with ADHD, sometimes timing is an issue, and it's always been a bit of an issue for me. I get there just in time to do it. I'm all out of breath. We start coaching, and I'm in a room about 100 women 100 white women at that. And the coach was a white male. But in the middle of that scenario of all the places, we started coaching, and it was so odd. It was like a movie. You know, like a movie where like people are falling in love and like all the background like goes away.
Hazy,
yeah, it felt like that as we were coaching. And I had a big breakthrough that I really wasn't accepting my ADHD. So I'm a mom of an ADHD kid. Of course I accept it. I'm a psychotherapist. Of course I'm accepting it. No, nope. A lot of masking, right? A lot of like pretending, trying to just be perfect and normal. A lot of like, again, like when I ran in there like so upset. A lot of that was just not really even dealing with the fact that how were you going to get down there on time when you know that there's kind of an around it.
Well, the thing is, you were masking your whole life, so
yeah.
So that's what you were used to.
Well, you don't even know, because if you had asked me, I would have passed the lie detector test. I always say that, like I would have, of course I, right? I'm enlightened, right? But I really wasn't. And acceptance of your ADHD is really the linchpin of having it go the way that you would like to live the life that you really want. The biggest part is acceptance.
Yeah.
And so getting that there was really the blessing of my life. But what I noticed when I left there, it's a 4-day conference at a big convention center with breakouts from like 8 a.m. in the morning to like 8 at night. I had decided to go to the conference to just get my CEs for my social work degree.
Okay.
And what I know in Philadelphia is 60%, about 60% of the people there are Black. There might have been 10 people in that whole conference for the 4 days.
Wow. That were of any color.
Yes. Wow. Of any color. So as I'm sitting at a table, you know, it's funny how I think the lunchroom at school, how like people sit off into their different groups, as all the Black people or people of color were sitting at a table. That's how few of us there were. And we became fast friends. We're all friends to this day. But by the time I left there, I realized like if I had this breakthrough and it was that monumental for me, why aren't other Black people getting this breakthrough? Do they not know about this? Do they not feel comfortable? And when I left there, I made it my mission to bring ADHD coaching to Black people, because you know they say that's 5% of people in the world. We've known now since the pandemic, it's far more than that. And, you know, everyone needs to get the help that they need to be able to live the lives that they want. And so now it's my mission to do that for people.
That is awesome. That is such a powerful story. And you brought up so many good points. One about the testing. Historically, before, well into the 90s, actually, 1990s, late last century. Can you believe it's already been late last century? That sounds weird to say. Late last century. All the studies were on white males. And so females, particularly those of color, there were no data. There was no data or statistics. So they were often misdiagnosed, if they were diagnosed at all, able to get to the therapist or a psychologist or doctor to be diagnosed and take those assessments. But even in school, the K through 12 system in the United States, and I'm speaking as a former special education teacher, I often came across parents who would tell me that, I fought for years to get my child tested. They kept ignoring my requests, and to get the school districts to test their children. And I taught in low income areas because I wanted to give back to the same type of schools I grew up in. And so it's like and part of me wants to thinks that them being in a low income neighborhood, there's all these stereotypical things, as you had said, your own son, even though he lives in a more affluent area, grew up in a more affluent area and school district. There's those stereotypes. Oh, he's the stereotypical bad Black boy, you know, he's trouble. And there's those implicit biases that sometimes more often than we'd like to think, take control of our actions and our others' actions and thoughts about individuals. And it is a struggle for people of color and low income to get these tests. And so there's people growing up and trying to cope and being labeled different things. And there's many that start to believe those different labels and just live to be, for those different labels, unfortunately, to identify as those different labels. And it's just our system is not, so it's a huge disservice. There's so many people that fall through the cracks, and historically it's been people of color and people of low income. It's just it needs to change, and slowly things are changing, but it takes time. It takes a lot of research, which I'm so happy to see that there's more research, a little bit more research being done on the community at large of all the different types of populations out there, of color and of race and of religion and everything, for all different types of studies. But there is often that masking mechanism also, because our pride gets in the way, because we're humans, and there's a lot of people that are successful, that have been able to succeed and find coping mechanisms and ways of getting around, working through situations. And there's, quite a few. And I think in our earlier conversation, you had said that a lot of, I think it was you, entrepreneurs identify as with neurodiversity and ADHD, and because they think outside the box, and it's just amazing. So one, I'm not surprised that you became an entrepreneur, and you were a very hardworking, successful Black woman. And two, it's just an empowering story that you have, and it's I'm so glad that you came on the podcast today to share it, and it's just wonderful. And so, based on everything that you said, how do intersecting identities such as race and gender influence the experiences of Black women with ADHD in professional settings?
Well, it is so interesting, where, as you said, so often, when you hear ADHD, you just think it's going to be, people do think it's just either little white boys fall in their chairs, or that, you are a problem, or that you're not successful. Mm-hmm. Myself and all the clients that I work with are successful people. I work primarily with Black women with ADHD, but I work with, different genders, different races, LGBTQ. I work with many people, and all very, very successful. But it's around managing the way that your ADHD affects you, during your day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, like you said, the biases that people have, the things that people are already thinking, or they don't realize that they're thinking, that affects you during your day. So, we've noticed that just lately, there've been so many Black women who have been bullied at their workplace. Mm-hmm. That has been, that unfortunate event of the woman who committed suicide, because of that, even though she had gone to her superiors, and they just, didn't pay attention. Mm-hmm. I hear these stories every day with Black women with ADHD. And you also have, just not being a Black woman, the neurodiversity is the fact that a lot of times sometimes we have heightened emotions, right? Mm-hmm. And when I get flooded with them, I could walk in a room and not be yelling and be perceived as yelling just because of the color of my skin. But imagine when that happens to you, you don't understand why people are mad or upset or accusing you of things that aren't happening, or you feel bullied, mm-hmm. or you believe that you're bullied. There's something that referred to as rejection-sensitive dysphoria, where sometimes the fact that when you feel rejected or you have these heightened emotions, you really can internalize them. And it can really affect you to not be able to perform at all at work, or perform at home, to be able not to live the life that you need to live.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping those feelings, trying to not be reactive when you're having those feelings,
Yeah.
can be a reason why someone would, like, I could see where people would kill themselves, or people come to me and they just can't figure out why they're not progressing, or they progress to a certain point and they can't seem to, break through to another place. And having to deal with what that is in corporate America, let alone
Mm-hmm.
when you're being an entrepreneur. When you're an entrepreneur, you're the one that has to, like, make these deadlines, make this money, and make the cash register ring, be clear. And if you can't figure out basically maybe how to get out of bed, because without the structure of a work day that someone else has put
Mm-hmm.
in place, you might sit in the bed and think that you're depressed.
Yeah.
But really, it's not that. It's just that you haven't put any structure around that. So, I tell all of my clients, I have an appointment every day at 10 a.m. I don't like to start too early. I'm not an early person. And because I work for myself, I don't have to, which is great. But at 10 a.m., I have an appointment on my calendar, because that means I'm going to get out of bed, get up, get ready for the day, get ready for the day. And I'll be ready to have a productive day, because I'm not going to miss a client meeting or, something I have scheduled at that time. But that's a way that I manage my ADHD. Without that, I could probably lay there in the bed too. Sometimes it's really great, right? So,
Yeah, so comfortable and warm.
yeah. So those things that people miss, and when there's already a stereotype of, Black people being lazy. If you're laying
Mm-hmm.
around like that, and you can't figure out how to get out of bed, again, like you said, you start to embody it. Well, maybe I am lazy. What does that mean? And it can keep people from definitely, like, living the life that they can. Like, so many of us hear that you have so much potential, but dot dot dot, and not living that. That dot 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 life is what I say. It's living a life that you would like to live.
Yeah, I mean, our mentality and our self-confidence and self-esteem is so crucial. Everybody's is so crucial. It's we need to take care of our mental wellness and health, because if there's any glitches in that, that's where imposter syndrome starts coming in. That's where, and we all have it, we all do, but it's as you said, having those coping mechanisms and those mantras, that time management to, keep you going, to keep you showing up, and to keep you, putting one foot in front of the other, because you are your best ally, but you're also your worst enemy. Because and the way people perceive us, from youth on, really has an effect on our mental health, if we let it, if we do not have those coping mechanisms. And it's very easy for children, because they're so impressionable, to fall into that mentality, not even realizing it, and even some adults. And it's, you had said something earlier about, the first step is acknowledging that you have a neurodiverse diagnosis, or you possibly might have a neurodiverse diagnosis like ADHD, and to go get yourself tested, which can be challenging. But it's like for any diagnosis, it's always that self-awareness that has to come first, that self-awareness and stepping out of your comfort zone to admit that you might need to get tested for something, or you might have a problem, like whether it be with alcohol or drugs or anger issues, or whatever it may be. I mean, there's all these different things that, but when it comes to mental health, those other avenues like alcohol, drugs, anger, depression are a lot of times stem off from that mentality, and it's like a domino effect that's going in the wrong direction. And there's, I mean, people just fall into that cycle, unfortunately. And so it's wonderful to me that you took this initiative and you are helping Black professional women and other marginalized populations, Hispanics, LGBTQ plus, individuals with disabilities, and get their empowerment back, and it, because it's something that they've been missing for quite a while. And so it's beautiful that you are doing this. So thank you.
It's actually my pleasure, because it's funny. I heard about this wounded healer thing, and I was like, that's not me, because I don't have any real wounds, right? And so for me, it's not that it was so much of wounds. Again, it was like so confusing. It was so confusing because I didn't know what was going on. It was just like, some days it would be great, some days it wouldn't be. And living a life of confusing, I say it's like, for me, it was like a hamster wheel from hell.
Oh,
so it's like,
that's a great analogy.
And then I'm like juggling, but I'm juggling now chainsaws that are on fire. And it's like, if I stop, everything's going to fall apart and blow up. But if I don't stop, I'm going to die. Like, what do you do? Because, I didn't know what was going on. But when I found out, like, a lot of people have grief, think would have been. And, I honor that. I honor the grief that, some people do have. Yeah. For me, it was different. For me, it was like, oh, now I know what to work on, right? Now I know what this is, and, what to work on to make it work for me. And that's what I like talk to my clients about, like, how are we making this work for you as opposed to against you? And a lot of that, as you say, is first, it is really self-awareness, like this is what's happening. And then self-acceptance, it's like, and this is how it's happening for you, because everyone with ADHD is a little different. Yeah. So, how your ADHD affects you. And the 20,000, they say that we get 20,000 more negative messages by age 12 than our neurotypical peers. So how that has affected you, and how we can then like unlearn some of that, and be okay with who you are and how you have to do things, as opposed to sometimes that linear way that many people will sometimes very well-meaning come to you and say, well, if you have a problem being late, why don't you just leave earlier? If you have a problem being late, like, why don't you just like put it on a calendar? And I'm like, do you think I didn't think about leaving earlier or try that? Or you think I don't have a calendar? But it feels so dismissive and leaves you more upset and confused, where, knowing that it's about kind of your brain wiring. And it's okay that your brain's wired a little different, because it brings that great joy of the big ideas that I have and the stamina to be an entrepreneur, right? The things that I can think of that other people don't, the way that I will problem solve in a way that other people won't. That's the great part. And not having to live in maybe that linear life, right? Because for myself and a lot of my clients, when we see people saying, oh, well, you can't do it that way, you have to do it, you have to take all these little steps, it's so upsetting because it's like, why do we have to take all these steps? Like, catch up with us. So, I always say sometimes you have to come back and you have to go get them and bring them along, because they can't see your vision. And not shame them, and ask them not to shame you, because we're not going to take each and every little step. And so it's really how you can live a life that works for you. And so I do work with businesses to help. There's so many, again, it's more than 5% of the population, and many people that are neurodiverse inside of any business you can think of. But to be able to allow people to express themselves in a way that works for them, they'll be much better employees, and they'll bring some visions to you that you didn't even see. And not shaming people for maybe their desk is messy. I'm sure their desk is, right? Or if, it's not, some jobs obviously need to be there like on time, but if somebody's a couple minutes late, that doesn't mean they can't lead a team. Like I have to have those conversations. One thing has nothing to do with the other. Sometimes people just need like, please don't sit people who are neurodiverse probably by the bathrooms or by where the coffee and water are. That's really distracting. But I've had people who would really have to go into like, how are we going to work?
You've seen that happen? Oh my gosh.
Yes, because that is, when we look at it, like, why are they having some issues? It can just be that if everybody who walks by your desk says, hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? How was your weekend? If everybody who goes by the coffee pot says, oh, do you know where the coffee filters are? If it's just even the bathroom going by and they're just distracting, you're not getting your stuff done.
No.
And you need to move your desk. You have to go and ask in certain instances. And sometimes to go and ask can be a big, why do you want to move? Why would that be? I had someone who worked in finance where her desk would be great was where they happen to be a place where the CEOs, everybody sat out. And where they could put her was by the CEOs. And it would look like she was moving there to be able to move up. Where she was like, I don't care about that. I just need to be away from, our healthy muscle is. And the way we had to craft emails and talk to people and really work on this took a lot of time and effort. And people don't understand that. And I just really, I wish that her company, I wish I could have went in and be like, could you just ask everybody where they need to be and let them move where they are? And I guarantee you, some of those other people who are like some of those CEOs, the reason why they sat in the middle is because they didn't want to be distracted. A lot of people who are neurodiverse run companies. So I always say, look at all the billionaires that make rockets right now are all neurodiverse, right? So, they're the richest people in the world. And no one seems to think about that. And I do, it's because they come in white male bodies. And, that's something, I do bring up and I talk about, right? So, but because of that, I always say to, you said my, marginalized populations, as we do say, even though, sometimes the wording, with me, always said it right. But, it's like, you're doing that, you can do that too. We just have to craft it in a way that it works for you.
I agree. I'm so glad that you brought up the business aspect because it's very important for organizations to realize people of all types are working for them, and they need to be aware of the hidden disabilities, the invisible disabilities that some of their employees may have, whether it's neurodiverse diagnoses, other mental health type diagnoses, emotional disabilities, and just internal pain. That is, you don't see any scars or anything on the outside. There's so many different invisible disabilities out there, and organizations need to be aware of this if they're not already, and they need to be accommodating and also flexible, because there's a lot, as you had said, there's a lot of people out there that, especially women and those of color, that have not been diagnosed and do not even realize that they may have a certain diagnosis because they were never tested as children or as teens or in their 20s, and they've learned to try to cope with it. But a lot of adults and employees know what some of their triggers are and what they need. So if your team member's asking for something, you can ask why. But they don't need to disclose a disability to you. But just try to be as accommodating as possible, because a happy employee is an engaged employee, is a productive employee, is an innovative employee, is an employee that will stay. And that is the bottom line, really. I mean, for any organization, nonprofit, for-profit, small, large, global, or just, a small local one. It's very important for organizations to realize that. And yeah. So let's go on to our next question. Yeah, definitely. So what unique challenges do Black women face in seeking support and resources for ADHD? And how does the ADHD Black Professionals Alliance address these barriers?
So, the support that we need, a lot of is community. You were talking earlier about masking and imposter syndrome, and that leads to burnout, right? So many Black women are burnt out. And, you were mentioning it earlier too. We push through. We've been told to push through. We've been told that that's what you're supposed to do. We've also been told you're supposed to take care of everything, you're not just work and strive to do that and look cute doing it, right?
Yeah.
Assertive, but not too assertive, move up, don't emasculate. All of those things, and then come home and, take care of your kids, make sure that they're okay and they look great and that they're all doing all the things that they need to do. Do all that, but not look like you're working too hard, take care of your spouse and it's like you're all that and to be sexy, right? But not too sexy, right? Yep. So it's like all that. Oh, and then you have like civic obligations or, different things you want to take care of. It's like, how many things can we have on our plate? Do you have like 18 parents and things like that? How many things are we supposed to do? And Black women and women of color in generally, we just take it. I say we do it like potato chips. Like we think we're supposed to do it. So it tastes good because, you get accolades. Oh, I said, you do this, do that. You're booked, you're busy. You do all the things. And then really on the inside, you are dying because it's too many things. And when you're neurodiverse, you have a certain amount of bandwidth that you have to work with anyway. And when you're too tired or when you have to deal with your emotions or when, as I said, like maybe you're coming into a room, you're coming into meetings and you need there to be an agenda, right? Yeah. An agenda is followed and you might need like, what are, we're going to do? Like, what are the outcomes? Like, you need that written down and they don't want you to take notes in a meeting or they don't want notes because they don't want to be accountable for the things that they said, right? Let's be clear. Yeah. You look up and you're tired and you're like, I can't produce. If I don't know what you want, I can't produce. The lines keep moving and people don't really understand that all the things that you're trying to juggle and the emotions that you're trying to juggle, you look up and you're burnt out. So having community around is really helpful because as I'm talking about things that are taking your bandwidth away, it's like, what are things that give you energy? Being around people who understand you, who you can have these conversations with. That's why I love having this conversation with you. I do podcasts all the time. This one's really great.
Thank you.
And having somebody else that just can get what I'm talking, and I know that you understand what I'm saying.
Oh yes, I do. And I'm loving this conversation, and because it's touching on so many things. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Freeing, right? It's freeing, and you don't always get this. So, like, I have a community. I have a Facebook community that's free. Black women with ADHD executives and entrepreneurs. I also have a coaching group that I do, and in both instances, it's a place for you to come and get the community you need and get some answers that you need. And not just from me, right? Like from the other people. For some, group is its own magic, right? I obviously have one-on-one, which is a more bespoke, thing that I do. But group is like magic because there's nothing like being in a room with people who understand what you're talking about and can give you that love and that space to be able to like even say these things. What's a full circle moment is that same international ADHD conference I mentioned that did the coaching with. I have done a Black woman's empowerment circle at that meeting, like a year after and every year since.
That is awesome.
Yeah, every year I have a great circle there, and it's only grown to it was so great because again it was like a handful of us, and now I have 100 women of my own in a room. That is talking about Black women with ADHD.
Yeah,
and is just amazing. And so those are the things I do with my group. And then you mentioned the ADHD Black Professionals Alliance. That's my nonprofit. And that's for ADHD Black professionals. If you're a Black person that is a professional that works with people with ADHD, you can come together and we can have fellowship and talk about things and case consults and things like that. But also it's for Black, I work primarily with women, but this is for anyone who's Black with ADHD to, again, have community, find providers who look like them every day. Somebody comes to me and says, somebody in my state, because if you're a therapist or a psychiatrist, you have to work in the state that you're licensed in. Coach work, you can, work all over the world. I work all over the world. But having a place where I guess like, oh, you need somebody who's in California? I have someone, as opposed to you normally have to look around and think about it and then remember to get back to them. So it's been great to start that nonprofit too. Awesome. Because again, it's much more than 5%. And I will say again, and too, as people of color, we don't like to look at these things. We don't like to look at anything that doesn't seem like it's the way that, I don't know, it's supposed to be, it just supposes. And mental health is not something that we really look at, where we're happy to have a place where we can go and talk about it, where it's not as pathologizing, where we can have conversations and bring people along to where they need to be. Because again, most of all, my goal is to have people live the life that they want to live. Because if you do that, it'll get rid of a lot of the ills that we see in this world. That people miss that's the real issue. Sometimes when they talk about other things that are going on, it's like, you guys are missing them. And what I love about you too is like, you're doing the same thing. Like we're trying to change the world, like our little at a time.
Exactly.
And that's how you do it.
Exactly. One voice at a time, one person at a time, and hopefully spreading the love and human centeredness and the sense of belonging and valuing each other. So, this is just a wonderful conversation, and I'm just really enjoying it. So let's start with our next question. Can you discuss the importance of culturally competent mental health support for Black individuals with ADHD, and how can mental health professionals better serve this community?
So just, piggybacking off of what I was saying. So a couple of things. When people cannot connect with you, they're not going to be able to accept your help. And so that's why people come to me sometimes and they're looking for a Black provider, somebody who looks like them. There's a shortcut. Like there's things that we don't have to discuss that we understand when we talk to each other. It doesn't mean that you can't have providers that, don't look like you. They can be very helpful. But if that's what you like, your comfort level, then that's what you should have. And that alone, allowing the space for people to speak their truths and not judged, would take care of so much of the things that we see. I think it would take care of so much gun violence, because a lot of it is people there's a lot of pain out there, and the pandemic did a lot of damage. And as you even mentioned earlier, some people are just living into the stereotypes that they were told they're supposed to. They don't even know it. Right. So that's a mental health crisis. And when you can have these conversations and have somebody say it where they can understand it, or, because a lot of them are younger people, they can express their pain, right? Feel comfortable. That's actually what mental health or mental wellness, I would say, would be. So having somebody who can get that and understand that. So that's why having someone who's culturally competent. So if you're working with people who don't just look like you, it's your job as a provider to do the work, right? Not have the client do the work. You need to do as much work as you can. It's interesting. My coach is white. My coach is that same white male.
That's cool.
But what's interesting is I've never really felt like I had to do the work. We've had to have a couple of conversations where we need to get some clarity, but I've never felt like I had to do the work. So having somebody who just can allow me to have the space of what's happening for myself, and trusting that what I'm saying is real, right?
Yeah.
Because some of the things that would happen for me, they would have no idea. And it can sound like that just can't possibly be real. Or, why don't you just do something like it wouldn't make sense. So doing but he's done the work, right? Or we wouldn't be doing that if they hadn't done the work. And so doing that work of learning how to be culturally competent. There are books out there. At this point, there's lots of things that you can do. And then if you have to ask your client questions, you can ask questions that are going to make sense where they don't feel like they're giving you the work. They're just maybe filling you in with some information. And it's needed because there aren't enough clinicians that are not white, right? So you need so many more. So to create more clinicians that are culturally competent, it's also something that's part of what we're doing as a mission for the nonprofit, to create more ADHD coaches, because I always say coaching is the way of the light. That's the way I feel about it. And it's something that I feel like can provide for people in a space where sometimes people will not, people of color won't go to a therapist. They just won't do it. Yeah, but they go to a coach, which can, if you need more care, it might help you to get to a therapist. But for ADHD, sometimes it's like you can go to a coach that can help you address some of the things that are happening that aren't working for you with your ADHD. You might be surprised, like, again, how many of those other symptoms, they get so much smaller that there's so much easier to treat if you do have to go to a therapist or a psychiatrist.
I definitely believe that. But I want to backtrack a little bit to what you said, like maybe a minute ago, of some people won't go to a therapist. So there's a cultural, in many cultures, not just foreign cultures, but cultures in different communities in the United States, there is that stigma of mental health, like I'm not crazy, and that's what they think of automatically, like the 1950s and before, what are those called, sanitariums. That's what they think of, and it's the stereotype. And it is very healthy to go to speak to others about what your experiences are, because that, as you know, and so I love that your organization, your nonprofit, is training people to be these coaches, the stepping stone. And maybe this is all some of the individuals will need, is to talk with the coach and work with a coach, and maybe not progress to a therapist, but they some will may need to eventually progress to a therapist. So I love that there's that stepping stone. So it's sort of like easing them into it, and breaking off that stereotype of therapists are just for crazy people, because there are so many professionals out there, that so many people out there of all colors and creeds and backgrounds that go to therapists, because it allows them to de-stress and to get some answers that they may not be able to think of themselves. It's always good to get outside perspectives, because they could help you prevent from being diagnosed with anxiety, or in addition to ADHD or depression, and just not have a nervous breakdown. And as you said, you mentioned the pandemic, and quite a few individuals, especially low income and those of color, did suffer a lot, because the nonprofits that were out there that were helping them shut down, and a lot of them did not have access to technology in the households, or if they did, they didn't know how to use it very well. And not all of them, but many of them. And so they couldn't access MD online or whatever, maybe, and they may not even have heard about it, because they may not have been in tune with that type of news and updates, and also their symptoms, if they had some, and sometimes they didn't have some, were getting worse because they couldn't communicate with professionals and others that could be that shoulder and ear and guide them to get back on track with what they needed to be successful, continue to be successful and healthy. So it's yeah, I mean, I had quite a few clients because I worked with when the pandemic started, I worked with a lot of immigrants and refugees, and in the nonprofit I was working at, and I loved my time there, and a lot of the stressors and the pandemic just increased mental health, as you know, and mental wellness, I should say. And as I said before, there's a lot of other, what was the word I use? Like symptoms that happen, whether it's drinking or something like that, but a lot of violence started happening in the households. And it's just, it's amazing how much the pandemic really affected things, but it also opened up society's eyes to the inequalities and inequities and the imbalances in our society, a global society, really, and not just the United States, but around the globe. And so in a way, it was a little bit of a blessing in that instance, but there was so many things that had to happen for us to even start acknowledging and doing something about it. So, yeah, I'm sorry, I digressed big time.
Important. It's important, and it's true.
Yeah,
it's true. I mean, I have so many clients that would meet in the car, right? Because just think about your home. If you didn't have where are you going to be alone? For some people, it's like, just they weren't ever set up to be together. And now you're together for a couple of years. And, and a therapist is really, because people like to talk to a friend or even like a clergy member, and that's great. But your therapist isn't your friend, right? They like you, but you're not friends. And you're trained to have a conversation that can allow you to have the space to start figuring out some things, or fill in some gaps of things that you don't know about how things are going on for you. So you obviously don't have to be quote unquote crazy, and you don't even have to have a diagnosis. I think everybody needs to see a therapist, because there's nothing like having that objective. It's like a loving but objective opinion of somebody that knows a way to be able to help you, guide you through this. So that's where therapy is. And then coaching is a partnership. So it's a little different entry point, whereas a partnership, for you to get to your goals, and for me, it's like looking at where the ADHD comes up and kind of keeps you from those goals. There'll be parts of that that are definitely filled with your emotions, but again, like if you're somebody who, I was having this conversation yesterday, if you're somebody who makes plans and then goes, oh my God, I made this plan, I don't want to go, you think you have social anxiety. And it's like, we looked at it, it's like, oh, so somebody's asking you to go somewhere with a whole bunch of people that you don't know, in a place that might be loud. We don't know if there's food, or like, if you're talking about something that happened like right after work, so you're gonna have to try to find a place to park. There's like
after so many driving through all the traffic.
Yes, traffic, all of these things. And then when you don't want to go, or you just, I'm going to go home, and then you're like, oh, I have anxiety about going. It's like, maybe it's not social anxiety. Maybe that's too many. It's like one too many things to deal with to go out, right? Like maybe you didn't want to have to do all those things. It doesn't mean you have anxiety. It might just mean that, if this is what we're doing, especially if you have sensory. A lot of people have sensory overload. When there's too many people, when it's too loud, like, if you haven't eaten, people are doing things like too tired, too hungry, too lonely, those things will cause anxiety. And then you'll diagnose yourself, I have social anxiety. Where sometimes if we back out of it, I'm not saying that you don't have social anxiety or some form of anxiety. You might, because, dual diagnosis or, having more than one thing is common. But it might not be bad as what you think. It might be like, well, then why don't we set yourself up for if you're going to go out with your friends, and before you say yes, it's like, let's find out all the things that are going to happen, right? To decide if you want to, and then maybe you need to if you're going to go, let's make a game plan about it. Like leaving, making sure you get there in time to get a parking space. Making sure maybe if they have food there that you ate ahead of time, like who's taking care of your kids, like make sure that we have all that stuff together. Maybe make another person drive so you don't have to deal with that. Like coming up with a plan so that you can go if you want to go, but also having the wherewithal to be like, I don't want to go, and being okay with that. Right. So that's what we do in coaching.
It's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, because it's okay to say no, but you need to know the whys. Yeah.
And it is a sentence now.
Yeah. It is a sentence. Yeah. Yes is a sentence and no is a sentence. You don't need to give your explanations. If your friends are really your friends, they'll accept a no. Not this time. So in what ways does neurodiversity contribute to the richness of diversity within the Black community, and how can organizations promote inclusivity for neurodivergent individuals?
So this is the good parts I love the most. Because again, so many times it's like, when I think about all the things that are bad or things that we perceive as bad, because sometimes they're not, again. So, but, perception can be that it's bad. Where, the thing about diversity, and like when we talk about neurodiversity, like in all ecosystems, there's diversity. That's how ecosystems evolve, right? You wouldn't want all giraffes, right?
Oh,
right? So,
they're cute.
That's what people myth, right? That would be weird. Right? That wouldn't work. That couldn't sustain like that. And so when we talk about like having diversity, like in neurodiversity, if you think that where you work, your ecosystem there would work as well if everybody's the same, I have news for you. It does not. And with all these people who are masking, trying to just do it the way that maybe they were told to do, all the energy they put out, they're not doing as well. Or as you were saying earlier, they'll leave, right? Because there's a point where you're going to burn out. You can't take it, or you just mask so hard that you wonder why you're sick. I do believe a lot of sicknesses that go on, they say stress related. The stress can be from all the masking.
Yeah, so, definitely.
Yeah. So when you let people be who they are, and not, judge them for not doing it in certain ways, and allow people to like be in rooms and have you like look at your implicit bias and see, am I not including them on the team because I think they can't handle it because they're Black or because they're a woman? Does everyone here they all look the same?
It's true.
That. They don't realize that they're, and our brains kind of work that way. You kind of look for things that look familiar. If you don't spend time in those spaces, you don't realize that, you'll have a team of people that all look alike. Yeah, I was consulting on a team and I was like, y'all, they actually looked all alike. They really did, right?
Oh, and wow.
We're diverse, but they looked alike. And the people who were neurodiverse were like, they didn't want to talk about that. And I was like, we don't have to talk about it in that way, but let's talk about like your goals and you wanting to be happy.
Yeah.
And being happy at work. And how can we provide that at work? And how can we have like, leadership from the top down, be on board, because the culture they set is the culture, that's how people are going to feel safe. And we were able to do that, where then people could be who they were. And we could come up with some systems that made it work for everyone, because, accommodations, if you're neurodiverse, the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, does apply to you, and you can use it. And if you have to, you can. But, I will say it's getting a little better, but people get fired, right? Yeah, they will. Sometimes, I unfortunately know somebody who moved across the country, took a job, later on disclosed like very soon and pretty much got moved out within like 6 months, and they moved,
Wow.
right? Like to job. And so it's not so cut and dry to be like, there's the ADA and you just get accommodations. I say, look, ask for what you need.
Yeah.
Try to look around and figure out what are the things that you need to be successful. And a lot of the times it's not big deal. Again, like the person who needed to move their desk. And I have this conversation about a desk more frequently than you would know. That doesn't cost the company any money.
No.
Not he wants to disclose because of the biases. But if somebody's like, I need to move my desk, or I need to be at this times, or maybe I need to work from home some days, or some things are something that doesn't cost a whole lot. Maybe somebody needs a standing desk. These are small things that can make things great. And so, but to give all of your employees that, right? Because not just people neurodiverse that might need that. Everybody needs different things. And a lot of times, again, it's not that big of a deal. Having meeting notes, allowing like one of these like AI things now to come in and take the notes. Now we don't, now we don't.
Yeah.
To allow that to happen can be game changing. And so knowing that this is what's happening anyway, it's always just prudent to allow that. And I think we're just kind of at a precipice where if we don't all kind of like figure this out together, we're really gonna, it's gonna split off so bad that I don't know what's really gonna happen in this world. So again, I'm here like to have people kind of like stand in your power, stand in who you are, and not let the neurodiversity stand in your way, but also have people who are not neurodiverse just let them be who they are, right? Not dismiss it, not discount it, not try to fix it. But if somebody says they need something, like, okay.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as you said, like all people need different types of things to be successful. And when you listen to your employees and value them, and actively listen to your employees, value them, and do something about it. And as you said, a lot of times it costs nothing or pennies to the profits for them to get what they need to be successful. Increases engagement, increases happiness, increases productivity. But I forgot what I was going to say afterwards. Oh man, I should have started with that because it popped right out of my head. But it's the richness of diversity. It's people, when it comes to the ADA, are scared of not getting hired, of getting judged, being treated differently, because that's how pretty much every human is. They want to be accepted. And when employers value the listen to their employees and provide the accommodations, and so that the individuals, their team can be their true authentic selves at work, it's just mind-blowing, the positive changes, not just for the employee, but for the team, for the organization at large. And knowing how, for leaders and other team members to know how, what the best approach is for every team member, not just the individuals in neurodiversity, but every team member across the board. What's the best approach for that individual? How to best interact with that individual, their learning style, their behavior style. It's just creates positive change. So part of me wishes that organization, as part of their onboarding packages, will make the DISC assessment or something like that one of the onboarding items, because it's a self-assessment tool for the individual to realize, I didn't realize I was like that. But I've never come across a person who read their assessment and said, oh, that's not me. They're very like, oh my gosh, this is like so me. I never thought that, I thought this was going to be a joke, but oh my gosh, this is me. That's usually the reaction. And for them to realize what their style is eye-opening, not only eye-opening for them, but eye-opening for the rest of the team, because then, especially as leaders, managers and stuff, and other leadership, they'll know who can best work with each other and which personalities might clash, to where it kind of stalls productivity. Because you want the best from each of your team members, and you want to put them in environments where they're going to be happy and successful and innovative and succeed. So it's things like those assessments, to me, I wish more organizations would just jump on board and make it an all-inclusive thing for all their employees, because it's is and not having to hire. Even though I'm an outside consultant, I love it when organizations hire me, but it's to just to have it as part of their onboarding package, whether an outside consultant like me performs it, or it's just done online as part of a package deal. It would be an eye-opening experience. But yeah, the diversity of teams is very important. A lot of people don't recognize their affinity bias, as where they're hiring people that they're comfortable with, that look similar to them, have similar personalities and behaviors, and it's not, many of them probably don't do it on purpose. It just happens, because people are people. And but to make them self-assess themselves, to be aware, like those Harvard implicit bias tests that are free online, which I will put in the slide in the summary of the podcast today, listeners, so you can self-assess yourselves as well, because it's very eye-opening, upsetting in some ways, but very eye-opening, and it lets you know it's more about you, so you can think before you act or respond. Yeah. So last question. I want to actually, let's skip the last question, because I know we're over already. So this has been a wonderful talk, Ingershe. I'm going to talk about some key takeaways really quickly, and some next steps, possible next steps for listeners. But before I do that, what are the best ways our listeners can contact you if they want to get services from your companies, so your nonprofit or for-profit, or if they want to invite you to be a speaker on their podcast or at one of their events? How can they best get hold of you?
Sure, thanks. So I'm at IngerShaye on all the socials. So IngerShaye is IngerShaye. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I also have a Facebook group, Black Women with ADHD Executives and Entrepreneurs. I have a coaching group, Professional Black Women with ADHD, the Sisterhood. And then the nonprofit is ADHD Black Professionals Alliance. You can link to that from my website if you need to, and that's IngerShaye.com.
And listeners, I will be putting all that information, all Ingershaye's contact information, in the last slide of our podcast today, but also in the summary as well, for those that are listening on Spotify and our audio only. So let's talk about some key takeaways. So Ingershaye and I talked about intersectionality on identity. We explored the unique experiences and challenges faced by Black women who are neurodivergent, particularly in professional settings. Ingershaye shed some light on the intersectionality of race, gender, and neurodiversity, and offered insights into navigating these complex dynamics. We talked about empowerment through community. We talked about the significance of the ADHD Black Professionals Alliance and its role in providing support, advocacy, and resources for Black professionals and other professionals, not just Black professionals, and its role in individuals with ADHD. And we talked about how community engagement can foster empowerment and solidarity among neurodivergent individuals. We talked about cultural competence in mental health. We talked about the importance of cultural competence and sensitivity in mental health support for Black women with ADHD. And Ingershaye shared her expertise as an ADHD coach and psychotherapist highlighting strategies for creating inclusive and affirming therapeutic spaces. And we talked about parenting and advocacy. So we talked about, we briefly mentioned some neurodivergent parenting. I talked about neurodivergent parenting and advocacy, and talked about some strategies for neurodivergent children and promoting their well-being in the neurotypical world. Some possible next steps for listeners. Connect with ADHD Black Professionals Alliance to access resources, support networks, and advocacy opportunities for Black professionals and individuals with ADHD. Educate yourself on the intersectionality of race, gender, and neurodiversity, seeking out literature, podcasts, and online communities that center the experience of Black women with ADHD. Advocate for inclusive policies and practices in your workplace or community organization, promoting diversity, equity, and accessibility for neurodivergent individuals. Prioritize self-care and mental health support, seeking out culturally competent therapists or coaches who understand the unique needs of Black women with ADHD, and engage with in conversations with friends, family, and colleagues about the importance of intersectional DEI efforts and the value of embracing neurodiversity in all its forms. So Ingershe, do you have any other takeaways or possible next steps for our listeners that I did not mention?
You did a great comprehensive overview.
Thank you.
But I just always like to say, so your ADHD, like, it's real. Like, when people tell you it isn't, it is. It's a real diagnosable condition. And it's okay to have it. You can always have a great life with ADHD. And seek out communities of people who are going to accept you and allow you to have that space to have these conversations. And that way you can gain some energy and feel like you're okay, because you are okay. And I just always like to leave people with that, so that you can live a good life with ADHD.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So thank you so much, Ingershe. I really appreciate your time today. And it was wonderful having you as a guest on Get Diversifused.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Listeners, stay tuned for our next podcast launch. Remember, they're dropped every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll talk to you later. And stay diversifused. Want to be a guest speaker on the Get Diversifused podcast? I'm on the lookout for guests, so if you're passionate about DEI and would like to share your unique insights, experiences, or success stories, I want to hear from you. If you're a fellow podcaster who's passionate about DEI, let's swap the mic and amplify each other's voices. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out to me at Andrea@diversifused.com, and I'll send you the link to our guest interest form. Hope to hear from you soon. Remember, stay diversifused. Now go out there and make a difference. And as always, for more strategies on building inclusive workplaces and communities, check out Diversifused. We're here to guide you on your DEI journey. Make sure to visit our website at diversifused.com and follow us on social media for the latest happenings, blog posts, tips, and events.